The spirit void hall had become a battlefield of gods and demons. Glacial flames devoured the air. Demonic ki twisted through the heavens, and every cultivator within knew that only the strongest would leave this place alive. If you enjoy my way of explaining and storytelling, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really motivates me to keep creating. Upon hearing that piercing howl, the demonic chi that had been driven back moments earlier instantly surged together once more, gathering and condensing into countless spheres of dense black mist. From within the writhing mass of demonic chi, a host of pitch-black demon beasts and grotesque monsters emerged. They snarled savagely, their forms grotesque and wildly varied. The largest towered over 300 feet tall, while the smallest were barely several feet in size. Yet regardless of their shape or stature, every single one bore the same feral, murderous expression as they fixed their gaze upon Han Li, who stood alone amid the raging sea of fire. The sight caused Han Li's heart to jolt. He cast his gaze into the distance and discovered that the demonic beasts seemed endless. They stretched far into the churning demonic chi, forming a terrifying tide that extended to the very limits of sight. Another shrill howl erupted. At once the demon beast puppets lunged forward from every direction, rushing toward him like a black storm. Han Li's eyelids twitched faintly. Without a word, he raised one hand and silently cast several azure celestial techniques toward the fire cauldron suspended above his head. The cauldron trembled. Brilliant red light burst forth from its surface, and in the next instant, the entire vessel was engulfed in blazing crimson flames, transforming into a massive, burning sphere. Countless torrents of searing fire erupted from the cauldron and plunged into the surrounding inferno. The temperature within the entire space surged violently as the sea of flames roared with renewed ferocity. At the same time, countless fireballs, roughly the size of human heads, began to shoot out from the churning sea of fire. Within each fireball was a single fire raven. Borrowing the overwhelming might of the surrounding inferno, these blazing ravens shrieked through the air and hurtled toward the incoming demon beast puppets. Crimson fireballs exploded continuously within the densely packed demonic army. More than 1,000 fire ravens danced wildly across the sky, colliding violently with the approaching monsters. Flames and demonic chi surged together, scarlet firelight and inky darkness intertwining as they clashed again and again. In the span of mere moments, countless violent collisions erupted, yet neither side was able to gain the upper hand. It was a strange stalemate. Whenever a demon beast was destroyed by a fire raven, its body would reform from the surrounding demonic chi. Likewise, whenever a fire raven was shattered, it would be reborn from the boundless sea of flames below. It seemed as if neither army could ever truly be extinguished. At that moment, a cold snort echoed from deep within the demonic chi. A low chant followed soon after, its voice resounding from every direction at once. It was none other than Old Devil Che. Han Li's eyes flickered as he abruptly looked upward, only for his expression to change instantly. At the place where the vortex had once hung in the air, the demonic chi began to churn violently. From within the darkness, a massive paw slowly emerged. The paw was pitch black, its surface gleaming with an oily sheen. It was enormous, 300 to 400 feet in size, and tipped with 5 razor-sharp claws, each one several dozen feet long. A sinister, chilling light shimmered across their edges, making for an utterly terrifying sight. Even before the monstrous paw descended, Han Li felt an overwhelming pressure descend upon him, as if the heavens themselves had collapsed, leaving him with nowhere to escape. The chanting suddenly stopped. The colossal paw came crashing downward. A violent gale of demonic wind erupted, howling through the air like a raging hurricane. The surrounding sea of fire flickered and wavered under its force. Even the massive monk staff seemed pitifully small in comparison to that terrifying demonic paw. Then, boom, an earth-shattering explosion rang out as the giant staff slammed into the descending paw. Yet the impact felt as though the staff had struck a fortress forged from pure steel essence. It slowed the paw for only a brief instant before being violently flung away. The colossal demonic paw continued its descent, crashing directly toward Han Li. Han Li pursed his lips. The 36 golden flying swords surrounding him suddenly rang in unison before streaking upward and converging. Above his head, brilliant golden light erupted. In the blink of an eye, the swords fused together, forming a massive golden blade, 50 to 60 feet long. Thunder roared. Thick arcs of golden lightning burst forth from the blade's surface, weaving together into a dazzling torrent of light that shot straight toward the descending paw. This enormous sword had been formed from the 36 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords, with Han Li's immense magic power violently poured into it. The blade possessed a destructive force capable of cleaving through nearly anything. Golden light flashed. The gargantuan paw was sliced cleanly in half. A muffled groan echoed from within the demonic chi, seemingly a sign that old Devil Che had suffered some form of injury. From the clash, the two halves of the demonic paw dissolved into drifting clouds of demonic chi and vanished into the air. The moment Han Li heard that muffled groan, blue light flashed abruptly within his eyes. He pointed a finger sharply toward the golden streak of light in the sky. The golden light instantly curved through the air, transforming into a golden serpent that lunged forward and bit viciously at a certain spot in the sky. A heavy thud rang out. Without warning, a sphere of piercing black light erupted from that very location. An inky black shield appeared, blocking the golden serpent's attack. The serpent snapped and tore at the shield relentlessly, yet it was unable to break through. At that very moment, black light flickered behind the shield as a short figure slowly emerged. It was a small child. 3 tiny braids stuck upward from his head, and an unidentifiable silver lock hung before his chest. This was the very form old Devil Che had taken outside the City of Ice. Standing calmly behind the black shield, the child observed the golden serpent gnawing furiously at the barrier, a faint hint of surprise flickering across his face. "Auric essence," he said slowly. "To think you would refine such a rare material into your flying swords. No wonder you were able to break through my heavenly demon paw." His expression soon returned to its usual calm as he looked toward Han Li. But Han Li ignored him completely. Instead, he murmured softly to himself, "So I was right. This truly isn't your real body." The small child's face darkened instantly. Han Li's blatant disregard infuriated him so greatly that he burst into laughter. He suddenly made a grabbing motion. Black light flashed in his hand, and a murky grey flag appeared within his grasp. "Heh. I used barely 20% of the Myriad demon flag's power just now, yet you're already arrogant enough to think you've gained the upper hand." His smile twisted coldly. "With my next strike, I'll destroy both your body and your soul, so you can witness the true might of the Myriad demon flag." As he finished speaking, old Devil Che unfurled the small grey flag, clearly preparing to unleash an even more terrifying attack. Han Li's expression grew focused. He suddenly pointed toward the raging sea of fire. Immediately, several dozen fire ravens burst forth from the inferno, streaking straight toward the small child. At the same time, the massive golden sword let out a long cry. Under Han Li's sword arts, it trembled violently before splitting once again into 36 golden flying swords. Each sword was about a foot long and radiated dazzling golden light. With a sharp, ringing sound, the swords multiplied into hundreds, swirling through the air before surging toward the child in a furious storm. The child merely pursed his lips. He temporarily set aside the grey flag and pointed calmly at the black shield before him. The shield trembled slightly before expanding into a misty barrier of black light that fully enveloped him. Golden light and black chi collided violently as countless swords slammed into the barrier. Yet despite the relentless barrage, the attacks produced nothing more than rippling waves across the surface of the shield. Not a single crack appeared. The seemingly ordinary black barrier was like an indestructible fortress. As for the several dozen fire ravens streaking through the air, the child paid them no mind. He simply resumed activating the grey flag in his hand. After all, those fire ravens were merely condensed fire essence. In his eyes, his shield alone was more than enough to stop them. The grey flag swept through the air. Immediately the entire space trembled violently. Murky grey mist began to seep from the surrounding demonic chi around Han Li's sea of flames. This strange mist emitted a bizarre spatial fluctuation. Suddenly, 4 black holes opened in mid-air. Each one was about 10 feet wide, swirling with ominous darkness as if something dreadful were about to emerge from within. Yet Han Li paid them no attention. Behind him, thunder suddenly exploded. Just as the fire ravens were about to collide with the black barrier, a pair of silvery white wings unfolded from Han Li's back. With a flash of silver light, he vanished. Almost at the exact same moment, crimson flames burst from the fire raven's beaks and slammed into the black barrier, exploding into blazing fireballs. The golden swords also crashed repeatedly against the barrier. But just as the child had predicted, the shield held effortlessly. Watching Han Li vanish from the sea of flames, the child's expression shifted slightly. A cold smile soon appeared. His chanting paused briefly. He flipped over his free hand, and a length of black rope appeared. With a flick of his wrist, the rope shot forward like a living serpent, splitting instantly into 7 or 8 identical strands. The ropes wrapped themselves tightly around a patch of empty air, roughly 50 to 60 feet away. The next moment, a flash of silver lightning erupted. Han Li's figure reappeared amid a thunderclap, exactly within the trap formed by the black ropes. Before he could even react, strange light surged through the ropes as they suddenly tightened, binding him completely. A sinister smile spread across the child's face. He opened his mouth slightly. Within it, black light flickered ominously. Clearly, he had been waiting for the moment Han Li was bound before unleashing a hidden treasure from his mouth. This turn of events caught Han Li completely off guard. He had never imagined that his opponent possessed a mysterious treasure capable of predicting the exact location where he would appear after using his lightning movement technique. His expression changed drastically. With a low roar, he formed a rapid hand seal. Brilliant green light erupted from his body, colliding violently with the black ropes. Then, Han Li vanished again. Left behind in the ropes was only a single azure talisman. Moments later, Han Li reappeared more than 100 feet away, his face slightly pale from the strain. In that perilous instant, he had burned an enormous amount of magic power to activate the spirit form talisman, one he had not yet fully refined, using it as a temporary body double to escape the trap. The azure talisman trembled within the ropes before dissolving into countless motes of blue light. Those motes shot through the air and returned to Han Li's body in an instant. Seeing this, the small child's expression tightened. The black light in his mouth flickered twice. Yet in the end, he only snorted coldly and slowly closed his mouth. At that very moment, several dozen feet away from the black barrier, silver light suddenly flashed. An azure humanoid figure silently appeared. It was the humanoid puppet. Without Old Devil Che noticing, it had already crept dangerously close. The puppet raised both hands. A crimson bow materialized instantly. Dazzling red light erupted, and in the next instant, countless flaming arrows shot forth from point-blank range. At the same time, an inky black dagger appeared silently above the child's head, hidden among the streaks of crimson firelight as it stabbed downward without a sound. Even though this was not Old Devil Che's true body, his spiritual perception far surpassed that of the old man transformed from the azure-back wolf. Faced with this sudden ambush, the child was startled, but he instantly recognized the black dagger as the true threat. His hand shot upward at astonishing speed, slamming into the shield before him. At the same time, he raised his head and opened his mouth again. A coin-shaped treasure shot upward amid a burst of black chi. The countless flaming arrows overhead converged into a blazing torrent, fusing together into a massive pillar of fire that came crashing down upon the black light barrier. At almost the same instant, the small child's palm struck the shield before him. In response, the black barrier thickened abruptly, its layers multiplying several-fold in the blink of an eye. A deafening boom erupted. The pillar of flames exploded violently against the barrier, unleashing a storm of scorching fire that caused the entire structure to tremble alarmingly. At the same time, the Devil Essence dagger descended soundlessly from above. The dagger sliced through the very tip of the light barrier, carving a thin slit through its surface before continuing its silent descent toward the small child. Yet at that critical moment, the coin-like treasure wrapped in black chi arrived just in time. With a crisp metallic ring, it collided with the descending dagger. A strange flash of light followed, and in the next instant, both treasures vanished simultaneously. Han Li's heart jolted in surprise at the sight. Fortunately, the humanoid puppet immediately transmitted a message to him through spiritual sense. The Devil Essence dagger had not been destroyed or erased. Rather, it had been temporarily trapped somewhere nearby. Reassured, Han Li quickly refocused on the battle and decided to unleash another of his hidden trump cards. Among the several dozen fire ravens that had been circling outside the black barrier, one suddenly spread its wings and released a piercing cry. Its body swelled rapidly, expanding to several times its original size in the blink of an eye. Immediately afterward, a torrent of white glacial chi erupted from its beak. This was none other than the Gratian fire raven one that had absorbed an immense quantity of profound jade's glacial chi within the profound jade cave. Ordinarily, such glacial chi would require months or even years of careful refinement before it could be converted into the true essence of the Gratian true flame. But at Han Li's command, the raven released a massive portion of it all at once. The white glacial chi slammed into the barrier. The contrast between the inky black light and the frost-white chi was stark. In the blink of an eye, a thick layer of translucent ice spread rapidly across the surface of the barrier. It took only a fraction of a second before a massive sphere of ice formed, sealing both the black light barrier and the small child entirely within. A trace of delight flickered across Han Li's face at the sight. However, he was well aware that mere ice could never truly restrain a 10th-grade demon beast. This attack was only meant to stall his opponent. Without hesitation, Han Li immediately formed a hand seal and pointed toward the golden swords hovering near the massive sphere of ice. As he began to chant, the golden swords shot upward into the sky. They circled through the air before scattering outward, vanishing one by one. Old Devil Che had proven to be an extremely troublesome adversary. Thus Han Li had decided to deploy the Aureate sword formation in order to slay him. Unfortunately, he had barely completed half of the formation when the enormous sphere of ice began to tremble violently. Moments later, countless strands of silver thread pierced outward from within the frozen sphere. The thread sliced through the ice, effortlessly shredding the enormous ice ball into slabs of varying sizes. Through the translucent fragments of ice, Han Li saw that the black light barrier inside had already vanished. It had reverted back to the small pitch-black shield. Meanwhile, the small child stood there, holding a treasure that emitted dazzling silver light. The countless razor-thin silver threads had originated from that radiant object. Within that ball of silver light was the very silver lock that hung from the boy's chest. Seeing this, Han Li could not help but release a faint sigh inwardly. It was clear that he would not be able to complete the sword formation. His expression turned grim. With a flip of his hand, he summoned the green wooden ruler and waved it gently toward the small child from afar. Spiritual light flickered above the child's head. A silver lotus, roughly a foot in diameter, suddenly appeared in mid-air. The lotus slowly rotated before releasing a vast cascade of 7-colored Buddhist light that poured downward like a radiant waterfall. The child had just broken free from the ice when the Buddhist light descended upon him, stunning him momentarily. At that precise moment, the humanoid puppet rubbed its hands together. A brilliant flash of silver light erupted. A spear several feet long appeared in its grasp. The small child's eyelids twitched slightly at the sight. The small grey flag in his hand suddenly rose of its own accord and waved gently through the air. Astonishingly, he managed to ignore the suppressive effect of the Buddhist light and activated the Myriad demon flag once again. The space around him twisted violently. A murky grey barrier formed instantly with the small child standing at its very center. At that same moment, the humanoid puppet hurled its arm forward. The silver spear transformed into a streak of blinding light as it tore through the air. At such a close distance, the spear struck the barrier almost the moment it left the puppet's hand. Yet what happened next was utterly bizarre. The silver spear pierced through the barrier with ease, but somehow it passed more than 10 feet away from the child before puncturing the barrier again and emerging from the other side. Han Li was taken aback. The puppet's spiritual sense had clearly locked onto the child. So how could such a precise attack miss by such a huge margin? But realization soon dawned upon him. The barrier formed by the Myriad demon flag possessed the ability to distort space itself. This was no ordinary defensive barrier that could be broken through with brute force. Behind the barrier, the small child held the Myriad demon flag in one hand and the silver lock in the other. He glared coldly at Han Li. Black demonic light flickered incessantly across his body as he gradually forced back the suppressive Buddhist light. Han Li's heart sank. This opponent was clearly far beyond the level of an ordinary late nascent soul cultivator. Moreover, fighting such an opponent within the domain of the Myriad demon flag placed him at an overwhelming disadvantage. With that thought, Han Li shifted his attention toward the 4 black holes near the Sea of Fire. Although the child had been temporarily restrained, the black holes continued to expand slowly. From within them came faint, indistinct roars, like the distant growls of monstrous beasts preparing to emerge. Han Li frowned slightly before letting out a cold snort. In the next instant, he made his decision. He put away the 8-spirit ruler and formed a new hand seal. Immediately the fire cauldron, the fire ravens, the humanoid puppet, the golden swords, and all of his other treasures trembled before shooting back toward him. Only the Gratian fire raven remained behind. It continued circling the spatial barrier, unleashing blast after blast of glacial chi. Although most of the freezing energy was diverted by the warped space of the barrier, the portion that struck true still managed to seal the child in ice once again. Yet the silver threads from the silver lock quickly sliced through the ice each time. The raven's efforts were proving largely ineffective. Soon after, even the Gratian fire raven returned to Han Li's side. At that moment, a yellow talisman appeared in Han Li's hand. Spiritual light shimmered from the intricate runes inscribed upon it. It was none other than the World-Breaker talisman that Fairy Ling Long had gifted him before her departure. This talisman was extremely effective at breaking through restrictive spatial domains. However, it was far too precious to waste casually, which was why Han Li had not used it earlier. But he had no idea what other terrifying abilities the Myriad demon flag might possess. Thus, he finally decided to use it, not to break through the spatial barrier, but to escape this domain entirely. After all, even if he broke through the barrier, Old Devil Che could simply activate the Myriad demon flag again. Killing him here would be extremely difficult. Escaping this restrictive space was the wiser choice. Han Li pinched the talisman between 2 fingers and flicked it toward the empty space before him. Brilliant yellow light erupted from the talisman. Violent spatial fluctuations spread outward. The space before him twisted and warped before revealing a transparent white sphere of light. Han Li's heart filled with joy at the sight. Immediately he summoned all of his nearby treasures. The flying swords, the fire ravens, and the humanoid puppet all attacked that spot in the air simultaneously. A thunderous boom echoed through the space. Through the white opening, the image of the spirit void hall in the outside world became visible. In the distance, the small child was still struggling against the restriction. The moment he saw what Han Li was doing, his expression changed drastically. He poured power into the Myriad demon flag. A pillar of grey light shot forth from the flag and struck the silver lotus above. With a muffled thump, both treasures vanished. The moment the child broke free, azure light erupted around Han Li. He had already transformed into a streak of azure light and vanished into the white opening. All of his treasures followed closely behind him. The small child stood there gripping the grey flag, his face thunderous with rage. Outside the domain, The azure light faded. Han Li reappeared in mid-air. At that moment, a series of thunderous explosions rang through his ears. Without hesitation, he summoned his flying swords to form a barrier of golden light around himself before surveying his surroundings. What he saw caused him to draw a sharp breath. The main hall of the Spirit Void Hall was enormous, stretching more than 10,000 feet in length and width. Several hundred feet away, a gargantuan object over 2,000 feet long hung suspended in the air. It looked exactly like the small grey flag he had seen earlier, except this one was countless times larger. Demonic chi churned endlessly across the surface of the colossal banner, and countless demonic runes of varying sizes flickered across its fabric. The entire entrance he had just escaped from was completely shrouded beneath the Myriad demon flag. No wonder he had been dragged into the restriction the moment he entered the hall with no chance to evade it. This was the true Myriad demon flag. The small flag wielded by Old Devil Che was likely nothing more than a projection of its spiritual essence. With shock still surging through his heart, Han Li turned his gaze toward the center of the hall. An extremely fierce battle was unfolding there. Much of the hall had already been transformed into a frozen wasteland. Howling white glacial chi filled the air, while the towering pillars of the hall were encased in thick layers of ice. Numerous ice mountains ranging from several dozen to several hundred feet tall stood scattered across the battlefield. High above the frozen terrain hovered a pristine ice phoenix over 100 feet long. Its entire body was cloaked in white glacial flames as it rampaged with terrifying ferocity. It was currently battling a beautiful middle-aged woman and two white-haired elders from the North Night Palace. All three cultivators wielded their treasures, desperately struggling to fend off the Phoenix's relentless assaults, though each of them was immensely powerful in their own right. Before the devastating might of the Ice Phoenix, they were clearly at a disadvantage. Han Li's heart trembled once more as his gaze fell upon the glacial flames covering the Phoenix's body. Those flames were astonishingly similar to Bai Mengxin's glacial Phoenix flames, yet their power was incomparably greater. Even if the glacial Phoenix flames were cultivated to their absolute peak, there was no way they could reach such terrifying intensity. Although Han Li felt a faint sense of suspicion about the connection between this Ice Phoenix and the glacial Phoenix flames, he did not dwell on the matter for long. Instead, something else struck him as rather peculiar. Old Devil Che was nowhere to be seen assisting the Ice Phoenix. Rather than joining the battle, he had instead retreated into the depths of the Myriad demon flag. That woman fighting alongside the two elders was clearly the palace master of the North Night Palace, the other, late nascent soul cultivator of the sect. From what Han Li could tell, however, she was noticeably weaker than Master Arctic Dragon. At the very least, she had never cultivated glacial flames. Otherwise, with the support of two mid-nascent soul cultivators, the three of them would not have been struggling so desperately against a mere 10th-grade Ice Phoenix. The Ice Phoenix's white glacial flames were simply too terrifying. Once the three North Night Palace cultivators were caught within the sweeping tide of those flames, their powers were immediately suppressed to a shocking degree. The sight left Han Li inwardly astonished. This was the first time he had truly realized just how overwhelming glacial flames could be. The icy fire unleashed by the Ice Phoenix was so formidable that it almost seemed capable of defying the very natural order of heaven and earth. Under such dire circumstances, if Old Devil Che chose to intervene, he and the Ice Phoenix could easily crush the three North Night Palace cultivators together. Could it be that Old Devil Che and the Ice Phoenix were not on good terms? Perhaps he did not dare emerge from the Myriad demon flag because of that. That was the only plausible explanation Han Li could come up with. However, at that very moment, an unexpected scene unfolded. The demonic chi surrounding the massive flag suddenly began to churn violently. A moment later, a portion of a corpse and several damaged treasures were ejected from the banner, tumbling downward toward the hall below. Han Li was startled by the sudden sight, but after a closer look, he discovered that the incomplete corpse was dressed in the robes of the North Night Palace. Judging from the attire, the deceased cultivator had likely held a rather high position Within the sect, most likely a nascent soul elder. A flicker of realization passed through Han Li's eyes. Only then did he understand that he had not been the only one trapped within the Myriad demon flag. Several other North Night Palace cultivators had been sealed inside as well. No wonder the massive flag had remained hovering in mid-air, guarding only the entrance. Han Li could not help but wonder how long those cultivators had been trapped within the banner. Those who had survived until now without being destroyed by the Myriad demon flag must have resorted to some powerful, secret techniques to temporarily resist its might. Otherwise, with old Devil Che controlling the flag's power, there was no way those cultivators could have endured this long. However, as long as there were still cultivators alive within the flag, old Devil Che likely could not freely use it to pursue Han Li. With that thought in mind, Han Li felt a wave of relief wash over him. He then carefully surveyed the rest of the hall. It did not take long before something caught his eye. In the distance stood a towering jade platform. The platform was over 1,000 feet wide and roughly 60 to 70 feet tall. Even from afar, Han Li could clearly see 3 teleportation formations arranged side by side upon its surface, 1 large formation and 2 smaller ones. Han Li's heart leapt with joy. Just as he was about to act, however, a strange look suddenly appeared on his face. Behind him, the humanoid puppet suddenly made a grasping motion toward empty air. More than 100 feet away, space twisted and warped. A black dagger shot out from the distortion. It was none other than the Devil Essence dagger that had vanished earlier inside the demonic chi space. Somehow, it had managed to break free from the restriction on its own and return to Han Li. The puppet casually raised an arm, and the dagger vanished into its sleeve in a flash. Han Li merely raised an eyebrow slightly, but showed little reaction. Azure light suddenly burst from his body as he transformed into a streak of blue light, shooting straight toward the jade platform. Behind him surged a vast swarm of over 1,000 fire ravens, accompanied by his flying swords and numerous other treasures. As long as he could escape the Spirit Void Hall, he could not care less about whether the North Night Palace or the demon beasts emerged victorious. Moments later, the streak of azure light reached the center of the hall. However, Han Li did not recklessly fly straight through the battlefield. Instead, he circled around in a wide arc toward the distant platform. Unfortunately, most of the hall had already been engulfed by the Ice Phoenix's glacial flames. Thus, as he passed through the frozen air, Han Li had no choice but to activate a layer of purple apex flames around his body. The violet flames spread across him like a protective cloak. All of the surrounding white glacial qi was repelled instantly, unable to touch him. Celestial ice flames. You're a cultivator of the North Night Palace as well. Do you really think you can deceive me just because your ice flames have mutated? At the center of the hall, the Ice Phoenix had already noticed Han Li's escape from the Myriad demon flag while it was suppressing the 3 North Night Palace cultivators. The fact that Han Li had escaped the flag had shocked it greatly, so it had been keeping a watchful eye on him the entire time. When Han Li transformed into a streak of azure light and flew across the hall, the Ice Phoenix became somewhat wary. However, seeing that Han Li was deliberately skirting around the battlefield, apparently heading toward another destination, it initially decided to ignore him. After all, someone who could escape from the Myriad demon flag was certainly no ordinary cultivator. If Han Li had no intention of interfering in the battle, there was no need to provoke such a powerful opponent for no reason. But the moment the purple apex flames appeared around Han Li's body, the Ice Phoenix's eyes suddenly turned blood red. It let out a sharp, furious cry. For reasons unknown, the mere sight of those purple flames seemed to enrage it to the extreme. Its hostility instantly shifted toward Han Li. Han Li faltered slightly when he sensed the Ice Phoenix's sudden killing intent. Before he could understand what had happened, a resentful cry erupted from the Phoenix's beak as it violently flapped its wings toward him. The icy feathers along its wings shot outward like countless arrows. In mid-air, they transformed into translucent flying swords, roughly half a foot long. There were 500 to 600 of them. Like a torrential storm of ice blades, they surged toward Han Li. Han Li was greatly alarmed by the sight. Regardless of their individual power, the sheer number of those swords alone was enough to chill one's heart. Moreover, these weapons had been formed from the feathers of a 10th-grade ice phoenix. Their destructive power was certainly nothing to scoff at. Han Li had no time to think. Not only did he refuse to stop, he accelerated instead. At the same time, over 100 golden flying swords and a vast swarm of crimson fire ravens shot forward to intercept the incoming storm of blades. Thunderous explosions rang out one after another. Golden light and white glacial radiance clashed violently. Crimson fireballs erupted continuously within the sea of white frost as the azure bamboo clouds warm swords and fire. Ravens managed to hold the ice swords at bay. Using that fleeting moment of delay, Han Li's streak of azure light shot past the center of the hall, racing toward the jade platform in the corner. The ice phoenix was clearly taken aback. It had not expected its attack to fail to slow Han Li down, even slightly. However, the demon beast harbored a deep and inexplicable hatred toward cultivators who wielded celestial ice flames. It had already equated Han Li with a certain man it had encountered long ago. Killing intent surged within its heart. Its massive body blurred suddenly, and 3 identical avatars appeared. 2 of them immediately flew toward the 3 North Night Palace cultivators. The third spread its icy wings wide. Brilliant white light burst forth. Then it vanished from sight. Han Li had been keeping a close watch on the phoenix all along. His heart jolted. He immediately came to an abrupt halt, stopping in mid-air. At this moment, he was just over 1,000 feet away from the teleportation formations. He certainly had no intention of flying straight into the mouth of the ice phoenix due to a moment of carelessness. With a dark expression, he rubbed his hands together before raising them simultaneously. Thunder erupted. Dozens of golden lightning arcs burst from his palms, each as thick as a thumb. The lightning arcs spread outward, weaving themselves into a vast golden net that covered an area 200 to 300 feet wide, with Han Li at its center. Almost at the same moment, about 100 feet away from Han Li's space warped violently. The ice phoenix emerged in a burst of white light. A fierce expression flashed across Han Li's face as he formed a hand seal. The golden lightning arcs shuddered violently before converging toward the demon beast. The ice phoenix was slightly surprised by the sudden attack, but it showed no sign of panic. Opening its sharp beak, it released a violent gust of white gale-force winds. The roaring wind tore through the air. The golden lightning net was instantly blown off course, unable to descend upon its target. Moments later, the net was torn apart completely by the raging winds. Han Li was astonished by the sight. He hurriedly attempted to summon the 8-spirit ruler hidden within his sleeve. But the ice phoenix moved first. It spread its wings wide and flapped them violently toward Han Li. Thunder roared. A vast expanse of white glacial flames erupted into existence. Within a single breath, the flames condensed into a towering wave over 300 feet tall. The enormous wave crashed toward Han Li like a frozen tidal catastrophe. Meanwhile, the ice phoenix itself dove straight into the sea of glacial chi. Its massive body vanished completely within the white mist. Han Li's lips twitched slightly. Blue light flashed through his eyes. With a swift motion, he summoned a ball of purple flames and hurled it forward. With a sizzling sound, the purple apex flames surged outward, forming a protective barrier before him. The glacial wave crashed directly into the barrier. White and purple flames collided violently. Though both were glacial flames, they rejected one another like fire and water. However, it was obvious that the white glacial flames were far more powerful. Moments later, the purple barrier trembled violently and began to collapse toward Han Li. Han Li's expression darkened. Gritting his teeth, he withdrew the 8-spirit ruler back into his sleeve and pressed both palms against the barrier. At once, the purple flames covering his body surged forward like a raging tide, pouring through his arms and into the barrier. The falling barrier stabilized once again. Yet at that exact moment, A flash of white light appeared within the massive glacial wave. Two enormous talons suddenly emerged from the icy flames. Each claw was over a foot long. They shot toward Han Li's arms like bolts of lightning. The talons shimmered with terrifying glacial power. Even though Han Li had cultivated the bright jade arts, he knew that if those claws struck their mark, his arms would be permanently crippled. But Han Li had clearly anticipated such an ambush. Without warning, two clusters of azure threads shot out from his sleeves. They intercepted the talons instantly. Azure light flashed as the threads wrapped tightly around the claws, binding them firmly in place.